Welcome to Sex, Psychics, and Psychedelics. I'm your guide, Banana Jane Garnett. I'm a licensed psychotherapist and an explorer of the human experience. In this podcast, I'm here to map out the frontiers of healing, invite in new perspectives, ignite authenticity, and to celebrate inner liberation. These conversations are designed for you, designed to help you find your path. You consider new things, you follow your bliss, and you cultivate a life of greater connection. Remember, it is together we find the true medicine. Please be in touch with any suggestions or thoughts. You can find me at the Banana Jane on Instagram. Now let's dive in. Welcome to my Ketamine Chronicles. Earlier this year, I decided to do a series of ketamine IV infusions in a clinic in Burbank. And I want to share my findings on these ketamine experiences. But I have a couple of things to say about ketamine first. So, as listeners may know, I've been an anthropologist in the psychedelic space for heading towards 2 decades now. I'm a psychotherapist, but I'm also an explorer. And I've always been really interested in the possibilities of psychedelics for getting under the hood, shall we say, and promoting neuroplasticity. As a therapist, I always felt like we couldn't quite scratch some of the places we wanted to. And psychedelics certainly get you to a whole other experience of yourself. Is it sustainable? Does it make sense? Results may vary, that's for sure. And I don't have anything highly conclusive to say about ketamine, so please consider this piece further exploration if you're interested. Before I get into my personal account of my ketamine journeys, I want to say a couple of things about the field of ketamine itself. First of all, I'm not a proponent of ketamine. I'm more an explorer of this chemical, which seems to be both helping and harming many people right now. Ketamine is a dissociative anesthetic that sits at the crossroads of medicine, psychiatry, and recreational drug culture. This is one of the reasons I'm so interested in it, as well as the fact that it is now very mainstream. So ketamine, which is a psychedelic, has gone mainstream in both medicine and recreation. Once it was a fringe rave drug and a hospital anesthetic, also a veterinary anesthetic. But now it's showing up in living rooms. It's a chill out drug, it's on the dance floor, and it's in clinics as a breakthrough therapy for depression, PTSD, and even suicidality. In the UK, nearly 300,000 people reported using it last year. In the US, use has spiked more than 80%. In the US, use has spiked more than 80%. And since the FDA approved esketamine nasal spray in 2019, ketamine clinics have multiplied across the country. So what started underground and in operating rooms is now one of the fastest growing frontiers in both nightlife or leisure life and medicine. One of the things that I'm so interested in about ketamine is it's a beautiful example of the importance of context in determining value, in determining is something a drug or is it a medicine? Because we know that ketamine can be very harmful as well. So I want to speak to that. Again, I'm not a proponent flat out of ketamine. I think it's an interesting thing to study and understand because it seems to have some serious benefits and some serious drawbacks. So ketamine can be, I think, highly addictive. It's not meant to be addictive, but certainly I've come across a lot of people who are in a state of ketamine dependency and they're not happy about it and it's not helping their organs. With chronic misuse, you can have bladder destruction, kidney, liver injury, cognitive decline, and there's a high risk of it being mixed if you get it outside of a medically overseen environment. The lozenges, which are prescribed, are pretty risky in terms of addiction. They're often overused, as are the nasal sprays, with lack of medical oversight. And then in clinics, you can have short-term dissociation, blood pressure spikes, and nausea. So this is the downside, as well as I think in recreational culture, ketamine has brought in sort of dissociative malaise. And some people say it killed the dance floor. And I think in general, people are mixing drugs in, indiscriminate ways, and it makes for a very mushy kind of a overall experience. And obviously the dissociative nature of ketamine is helping people feel supported in having a buffer between themselves and this crazy world. And I completely understand, empathize, and relate to that. And bringing dissociative drugs mainstream into party culture begs the question, where are we? If we're not coming online together, which is what I'm biased, but I feel like, the party that's sort of dominated by, the single chemical, the MDMA experience, invites a lot of connection, and ketamine can facilitate connection, but I would say en masse in a group it's less likely to because of its dissociative properties. So before I get to my personal experience, I want to give some more facts about ketamine and its uses. So ketamine has been FDA approved since 1970 as an anesthetic, and since 2019, a version called S-ketamine, Spravato, has been FDA approved as a psychiatric drug for treatment-resistant depression. So it's the first psychedelic to be broadly used in the US. Today it shows up in 3 ways: legally, off-label, and illegally. So legally, it's used IV or IM, and it's used in clinics for depression, anxiety, PTSD, and pain. IV is a drip into the vein. IM is a single shot into the muscle. And usually these are cash pay situations. The ketamine lozenges, these are oral sublingual troches. They're called troches. They're prescribed off-label by some psychiatrists and therapists, often for at-home use alongside psychotherapy. So, for example, if I have a client who is prescribed these lozenges by their psychiatrist, then they can come to me and they can take the sublingual lozenge before our session, and we can do trauma work that is facilitated by this kind of psycholytic dose of ketamine. So we can do EMDR with a psycholytic dose of ketamine, which means that it's a light enough dose that they can still talk and process, with the benefit of this sort of dissociative buffer that ketamine brings. So we can actually kind of get under the hood, move around the trauma without so much charge that we can't stay there. So often what happens with trauma work, and even in EMDR, which is a great tool for trauma, is you hit the trauma and it's just so explosive and it's so big that it's really hard to stay there. And you spend the rest of the session sort of mopping up the tears, so to speak. That can be good work. But at the same time, sometimes we need to actually just sort of hang in there with the trauma, really look around the edges of it, see what happened, see what meaning was made of it. So having this buffer can be very, very helpful. So that's the lozenges. Then S-ketamine, this nasal spray, was FDA approved in 2019 for treatment-resistant depression and later for acute suicidal thoughts. So that's only given in certified clinics with monitoring, and it's usually covered by insurance. So the effectiveness of that is rapid relief of treatment-resistant depression and suicidal thinking. It's promising, but it's less proven with PTSD, OCD, anxiety, and chronic pain. And the limitation is that the benefits usually last days to weeks, paired with therapy and integration. Truthfully, in my opinion, again, results may vary because some people get shifted by one big ketamine experience. I've seen it happen myself, and it's a fact. Other people just don't get very helped by it and even get hurt by it and caught in the weeds. So again, it's a really it's really reductive to make rules about ketamine, in my opinion. And that's one of the things that this podcast is really about, is seeing ketamine as an opening. It's more research than conclusion. It's more space than fact. And I think that's how it should be used. And that's kind of an interesting concept to introduce in kind of mainstream medicine. So now we're going to get to my personal experience. Over the course of 10 weeks, I experienced 5 ketamine IV sessions at full dose, 2 weeks apart, in a clinic called Modern Medicine in Burbank. So what follows is the chronicle of my experience. And I think what's important here is to preface this experience with my state of mind going in. I was not chronically depressed, so this is not going to really help you know whether ketamine can help with chronic depression. I believe that it can, from what I've seen from the clinical angle. This exploration that I undertook came from a place of curiosity as a clinician, but also self-interest, in the sense of, could this help me improve my overall mental health? It was kind of a wellness challenge as much as anything else, because I was not technically depressed. I was in what I would call a fairly normal middle-aged state of mind. As far as we could normalize mental health and subjectivity in general, I would say I was fairly normal. I wasn't feeling over the moon about life, but I was not depressed in any clinical sense. I was, however, feeling the heaviness of life, I would say. I was suddenly aware of the heaviness of life in very general ways. I had several things going on. I had impending grief of my eldest daughter graduating and preparing to leave for college. Again, very normal stuff that we want to feel, but it was there. It was there. It was a weight in the picture. I had tension in my romantic relationship. Again, not kind of to a crazy extreme, but more than I wanted. I had anxiety around my ability to earn money at the level I felt was necessary. Again, kind of what I would call a sort of rather normal level of like pressure and stress. Again, you know, what is normal? I'm sure everyone has their opinions on that. But according to how I understand mental health, I was sort of like in that kind of normal zone. But I also felt like I could feel better. I could do better. I could be just one notch higher than, you know, the particular kind of survival I was in. I was like always looking for the thriving, you know. So I entered the process as a psychonaut, curious about consciousness, curious about chemistry and healing, and open to whatever might come. I also carried a clear personal intention. This was in spring 2025, and I knew, as we do, that in the summer of 2025, I was going to turn 50, the whacking great number of 50. And 50 felt like a milestone. And I'm now past this milestone as I narrate this, but I believe in milestones and I want to respect them. And so I was thinking long and hard about what it meant to turn 50. And I also really wanted to enter this new decade feeling strong, clear, and resourced. I wanted to do it justice. I didn't want to just be kind of getting through it. And I hoped the medicine might give me a kind of opening, a freshened perspective, a sense of renewal about being 50, about this next chapter. And I didn't know how it would land, but I somewhat, I suppose, trusted the process to show me what I needed. So here we go. Here are the chronicles of my sessions, plus a note from my integration coach on her perspective. So I want to add, very important and important for anyone who is thinking about doing this kind of work, is so important to have a support system in place, particularly a professional. So I was working with a therapist who is also a coach who does know quite a bit about psychedelics and who I've known for quite a long time. And she has given me her permission to share her perspectives on my process. So here we go. That note I'm going to add at the end. So session one, here we are at the end of January, and I go into this clinic in Burbank, and it's strange because I'm so used to psychedelia within ceremonial context, and it's strange to be going in an Uber to a corporate building and checking in at a front desk, and then actually they'd done a beautiful job in the clinic. That given that it was a very corporate environment, they'd done a great job with the lighting and the choice of art, and they'd done their best, but still it was a clinic, and I was still in Burbank, and I was still in a corporate building. There was no candles, no fire, no sage. And so it was sort of slightly unfamiliar in that way. It was also incredibly comfortable. So I was put in a very comfortable chair. I was given a weighted blanket. I think that the chair warmed up. I couldn't have been more comfortable. And I decided to go for the full dose, and I put my eye mask on, and I was given a playlist. I learned to get more controlling about the music as I went, but this was my first session. And it was quite, it's ridiculous to say it was trippy, but it was very trippy, my first one. And as the dose of ketamine increased, so did my quote unquote grip on consciousness. Now, I guess the whole thing lasted a couple of hours, so it's quite short given the kind of depth of the experience. But little by little, I was losing my normal frames of references. Normal frames of references were slipping out. And because I like to study consciousness, that's exactly what I was doing. So I was looking at my mind, looking at itself, and trying to get a handle on itself, and the impossibility of doing that, and this sort of endless process of reframing where the observer is in the picture, and is it there, and is it here, and is anyone anywhere, etc., etc. And it was sort of like a game I was playing against myself, I realized later. So that in itself was quite interesting. It was like kind of self-consciousness on crack plus psychedelic. So I was starting to get a sense that maybe this wasn't the way to go, but it took me a minute to realize that. And towards the end of the session, I started to feel more into my heart. I started to feel more of a kind of a beautiful expansion and an access to the realm of the heart. And I had this thought, I'm receiving the medicine of my own heart. I had this thought, the heart is the source of the Big Bang. I thought ketamine opens this spaciousness, it's heart and mind. I was actually having the clinicians take notes as I was having this experience. Obviously, I had my eye mask on, and they were actually surprised I could speak, given the dose that I was on. But I was very intent on, getting these messages out. So it was very interesting, this first journey, and I wasn't really sure what to think. My mind was very active, and I was studying ketamine from these different angles. And so the next session I had, I decided to come in with more intention. And I thought this whole head business is a loser, just trying to figure out consciousness is a loser. It's just stupid, honestly. Okay, so I've been shown, I suppose, by session one of ketamine that trying to figure it out doesn't work. I mean, how many times am I taught this lesson on a daily basis? But I guess yet again, this message was trying to come through. And in a way, it was very well illustrated. It was more well illustrated than in my normal, daily meditation. I go into session 2, and this time I'm like, okay, forget what you think. Forget what you think about what you think. And let's travel down and remember the body, even though this is a disassociative experience. Let's be intentional about inviting the consciousness into the heart space, which is the space that seemed to want to come online in the first one, and drop down into I call it sort of the warm mammal experience. And when I remember, I do this in meditation, right? When you go from the racing brain, and you just drop the energy down into that sort of warm, soft experience of the torso breathing. So that was my goal, was kind of to go under the wave and just feel. So I went in with this intention of surrender, grace, calling in protection. Oh yes, that was the other thing, is that in the first one I realized not only is it crazy watching the mind losing its grip on itself, but it's also kind of sacred. In some ways it's a death experience. And I suppose I'm pairing that with, what I experienced with 5-MeO DMT, this kind of death process that can really open you up. And so that was another thing I thought of as, I'm really opening myself up here. So how about some protection, and how about really inviting in the idea that this is, maybe sitting in a clinic with a needle in my arm, but also this is very sacred to open up consciousness. It's a very, very privileged thing to do, I believe. Why do I believe that? I don't know. It's just in my bones. I think it's an extraordinary thing that we can get to play with consciousness. I think it's a great gift, and a pretty wild gift too. So that's the way I went in, and it was so much better. It was so much better to go into this heart space. And in fact, I got a beautiful gift in this session where there was a lot of water imagery, and I was looking at a lot of beautiful images of water, and in particular this kind of beautiful beach water that I saw in Costa Rica. And that thing where the froth of the waves hits the shore and sort of plays with the sand. I kind of went into a beautiful kind of close-up of these sand particles getting rolled in the water froth, and I became the sand and the water, and I was like the sand making love with the water. And I was like, is the sand my nervous system? Am I getting loosened up in some fundamental way? I don't know, but I liked it a lot. I can tell you it was a very beautifully kind of erotic moment. And that moment was very playful. And I had this thought of, instead of the rubber hitting the road, it should be the water hitting the sand. And it was this sort of sense of like adding playfulness to consciousness. I saw so many beautiful things in that journey, and I saw heart space itself. It really opened up on this journey, and the heart space was opened like the reveal of the night sky. When you find yourself suddenly in a place that's really remote and you've forgotten how many stars are in the sky, and you can't quite believe it. You can't believe that there's so much light in the dark, and you can't believe that there are so many different sort of gradations of it. It's like there are so many different layers of stars when you can really, I'm thinking about the stars in Sun Valley, Idaho, and being at a place so remote that there's no other light, and it's just coming from the sky, and it's like, breathtaking. But in this journey, this was an illustration of heart space itself. So the details of the heart space, the stars within the heart space, were like these sort of pixels that were parts of code. It was like this ancient cosmic kind of braille. It was like you could touch it and feel it and read this kind of ancient wisdom. It was like this language that could be read through the heart. It was a language that could be read through feeling. It was the language of oneness, the language of the collective heart, the great mother, the experience of existing in union with many people. So I wrote after that, the heart mind is a purer place to be than the head mind. Heart consciousness is the soul and the body. It is more aware of what your essence is, of what your belonging is, than any other part. The heart confronts with feeling. it can't be argued out of. It has its own truth and its own stability. If it hurts, it hurts. If it expands, it expands. If it elates, it elates. If it contracts, it contracts. Between sessions 2 and 3, I noticed a lightening of my mood, and I had some really good heavy sleep at that time. I decided to go back in and plant seeds in the love field. I was getting quite into this heart consciousness space. I planted seeds for protection for myself and my family. I planted seeds of faith in my relationship. I planted seeds for the realization of my work dreams. And I wanted to look more into rage. I wanted to look into the experience of separation. So this one, I did some shadow work. I saw through some of the judgments I'd been making at the time, and I saw that actually the person I was judging was really just my own shadow. Again, the kind of lesson that's come to me on psychedelics many times, right? You're pointing the finger at someone and actually, it comes right back to you. Good stuff, good stuff. The humbling. I saw different aspects of my own relationship issues. I saw my codependency. I saw different relationship patterns. And that was helpful. And then I think as a sort of resolve of codependency, I saw an umbilical cord that was connecting me to myself. And I had this beautiful kind of self-love experience. And it was kind of a complete experience. I wrote about it. Self-love is as real as anything can be. It is complete. Yes. And then the rice stuff started. So as you can tell, given that this was a complete kind of release of consciousness, in some ways it wasn't that crazy. Like everything made sense. But when the rice stuff started, I didn't know what that was. So I started seeing images of rice and it sounds so nuts. This thought, I am rice. And by the way, when it comes to the rice stuff, which is the weirdest stuff in this, I mean, when I say weird, rice isn't that weird, right? But what the rice meant in my journey context remains elusive. So if anyone has any thoughts on rice symbolism or what this might mean, please feel free to get in touch with me, garnett.jane@gmail.com. So anyway, yeah, I became rice. There was an image of me as rice. And there was this thought, I am rice. Okay, psychedelics, what are you going to do? I mean, I wouldn't be talking to you about this, but it just kept happening. After the rice started, it didn't stop. Anyway. Okay. Session 4, my intention was the release of self-centeredness. This was inspired by a Buddhist book I'd been reading at the time. And this was a journey into the idea of service and how true beauty comes from the heart and greatness is in the heart. Our hearts are great. And again, we went back into the importance of the collective heart. It was a beautiful image of my ego being tucked into bed. But the ego illustrated itself as the letter I. And so it was like a cartoon image of the letter I being tucked tightly into bed. So that was nice. And there was a beautiful moment where I became a rose. So with the thought, the heart is the home of truth, I saw the Rose Meditative. You might know the Salvador Dali painting, one of my favorite paintings in the world, which is of a beautiful, massive red rose without a stem, hovering over a landscape, and it kind of looks like a spaceship. And I always see it as it looks like, salvation, like the collective heart has come to save us. So I saw that rose, and lucky for me, I entered the rose, I entered the petals, and I became a petal. Then there was this thought that I've had before, very poetic thought, the rose knows. As I was a rose petal, the folds of the rose were revelveting themselves, softening, renewing, and endlessly lush. I mean, if you're hanging in here, you are a fellow fruit like me, obviously. And if you're just listening thinking, well, she's crazy, that's fine too. Enjoy. This rose sequence was just exquisite. And it actually became this kind of compassion exercise. And there was this breathtaking sequence where I was in a wheel and the wheel was turning, and each click of the wheel, I would meet somebody who was dying. It was kind of like this hospice experience, but there were so many of these people who were dying. And every time I met one of them, I handed them a rose. And then I would meet another one and I would hand them a rose, and I would hand them a rose. And it was honestly one of the most moving experiences ever. Stunning experience. So, gosh, kindness was coming online, and the heaven of kindness and celebration of the beauty of the heart. And then there was another heart section, which was quite interesting, that I've been thinking about a lot, where I got a completely different kind of heart image, which was like the heart was an icy forest. Everything was covered in ice, and it was like the Queen of Hearts covered with ice, and it was, we must defrost the heart, and that was the thought that came with it. We must defrost the heart. And was that the collective heart I was seeing, or was it a frozen over part of my own heart? Well, if I had to say, I would say both probably, because I do feel like I've been encountering some of the ice in my own heart recently that I hadn't really been conscious of. And so then the last session, my intention was actually about freedom and spilling free, because in the session before I'd had some kind of sequence about mess and my own intolerance for mess, and so I was kind of reframing mess as freedoms. It was another exquisite journey. I don't want to bang on too much about all the beautiful images that I received, but there was a lot of joy. Okay, one great image. I became the yolk in the egg. That was pretty cool. Obviously, there was more rice going on. I saw the paddy fields in Bali where they were growing rice. And then I saw myself as a grain of rice in a little bento box of rice. And, you know, just that kind of stuff, normal stuff. Rice, was pretty intentional, I would say. That imagery wanted me to see it and wanted me to know that rice was something to think about. And I have not come to any conclusions about rice. I've listened to some rice podcasts, and I know that rice is used traditionally in ceremony. I think it's got a celebratory property, it's got a cleansing property, and it has so much rich history. It's something I can never really come to a conclusion about, and I think that's part of the greatness of rice to me, is that I can't figure it out. And a lot of what this journey represented to me as well was not being able to figure things out, and the journey of the heart being an embrace of not being able to figure things out. So here's my note from my therapist who was helping me integrate these experiences. She said, I witnessed a quicker return to the heart and the bigger picture and how it's all actually connected. Certainly the heart featured prominently in Jane's experience. It not only brought her more deeply into her own heart, but heart consciousness itself. She said, she's also a psychic, by the way. She said, on a psychic level, my observation is that Jane's actual heart feels expanded. And my assessment is that she is now able to drop into acceptance more easily, holding a level of acceptance that feels connected to the support of the medicine. There is no sum total, really, of the experience, because life has so many parts and they're all moving all the time. And I can't tell you that what happened for me would happen for you. I am grateful for the experience, and there's something about the spaciousness of it all and the versatility of the spaciousness of it all and the versatility of the perspectives that does encourage neuroplasticity. And I would recommend if you are a heady person and you do want to try the ketamine, I would recommend the heart intention. Yeah, I'll keep you guys posted, but I hope you enjoyed this intersectional experience somewhere between the psychological, the spiritual, the mystical, and the medicinal. And I hope that you are meeting me here in Heart Space. I'm sending my heart and my blessings and my best wishes and my fruitiest imagery out to you right here, right now. So much love. And I forgot something important as well, further to the defrosting of the heart, the main theme of this, which is that music is a very, very big part of all of this. And in the beginning, the playlist that I was creating were the kind of the playlists I thought you should create for a ketamine journey, you know, sort of spacey, minimalist music. And then I was like, why am I playing this gloomy music? You know, I'm defrosting the heart, for God's sake. So I started playing a range of music. I had playlists with jazz, medicine songs, disco, EDM, you know, African folk music. I had all sorts of music going on, and it was wonderful. And, you know, ketamine does set a stage for music in a way that is quite outstanding. And the other piece of defrosting the heart that I did not mention earlier was in my own voice. So that was really interesting. So I had this sort of weird persona when I started dictating on ketamine, where I was transmitting these heart messages in a very imperious way. I'd be like, we must defrost the heart. You know, thou shalt not be unkind. It was very like from the mountaintop. And I think I started to become aware of it. I was like, wait, where's my heart and my voice? And at the same time, I was also becoming more connected to the clinicians that I was with. And we were having a laugh about this, about my imperious tone in the dictations. And I just started to speak in a more like connected way where I could hear the heart in my voice and I could hear myself in my body. So that was pretty cool too. So yeah, I want to thank everyone who was involved in my Ketamine Chronicles. It was a really cool thing to do as an explorer. I'm very appreciative of it. It was a total privilege. And I hope that some of this has resonated in ... You know exactly where, that space where it all counts. Lots of love again.